Hi everyone, welcome to channel Qtomation. In previous session, we have started with web tables. We have seen what is web table. Web table is a common UI element found on web pages that displays the data in tabular format. We have also seen how to print count of rows and columns in the web table, how to read a specific row data, column data. Today we will see how to print all the data from table cells with pagination handling. So if you see this example, in last session on this website we have seen this static web table in which we have printed specific row data. Today's session we will see about this web table which contains some pagination as well. So my requirement is I want to print all this data along with this pagination. For example, I want to print this file data. After that, I want to click on this second button so that I will land on this second page of this web table. Then I want to print all this file data again. Then I want to go to next page. Again print all this data. Then go to last page and print all this data. So I want to print all the 20 records present in this web table. I want to print all the data which is present inside this web table on different pages as well. So total 20 records I want to print on my console. So let's see how we can do it practically. So now let's go to Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, let's create a new file. I am creating a new file. Let's name it as web table. Let's name it as web table underscore demo underscore page dot spec.js. So I have created one spec.js file. I am just copying the code of our last session and I am pasting it here. Let me just copy the code from our last session and let me paste that code here. Let me remove some of the lines which we don't need now. So if you see, we have this test block. In this I am opening this website. After opening this website, let me just remove this part. So once you launch and open this website, we have to find out this table first. So let's inspect this. In our last session we have already seen table is present inside which container or which tag? Table tag. So if you see now this table tag along with some ID which is equal to product table, we can locate this entire table. So let me write out ID. So when we use ID of the element, we have to use hash before that. So now if you see, this is highlighting the entire web table. So let's copy this and I have defined one constant my table equals to page.locator. In this I am passing locator of that table. Now we have located that specific table. Now next step is I want to find out number of rows and number of columns. So let's define one rows. Constant rows equal to. Now I want to find out total rows which contains a data. My use case is I want to print this data, right? So this is present in which row? So let me just use this. So if you see now the structure, so there is a table tag. Table tag is highlighting entire table. Table tag is highlighting the entire table. We don't want ID, name, price and select. So we don't want this first row actually. That is present inside this T head tag. When you use this T head tag, it is highlighting that first row. But that T head tag contains table headers which we don't want to print. So we can avoid this. So instead of T head tag, what we will do? We will see this T body tag. Now this T body tag is containing all the rows which contains the actual data which we want to print. So this T body tag contains multiple rows. If you see now, this T body tag is containing how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So total 5 rows are present inside this T body tag. This row are the one which contains the data which we want to print. So if you see, we have already located the table. We have already located the table. Inside that T body tag and inside that TR tag. So what we have to use here is, if I want to locate all the rows, so I will simply use await page dot, not page, but I can simply use await my table dot locator inside this T body space TR. So it will capture all the rows which are present inside the table. So rows which contains a test data, not the test data but the data which we want to print. So if you see, this data which we want to print is contained inside this T body and TR tags. So all the 5 rows are captured in this specific locator. So now these rows contain all the 5 rows which we want to print the data. For the first page, basically that pagination we will see in some time, but let's understand first. What I will do, I will just focus on printing the data which is present on this first page. So first page of this table, I want to print this data. So first we have identified all the rows. Now if I want to find out count of the rows, how to find out count of rows? So what I will do, I will simply define, let's say one more constant, rows underscore count equal to rows dot count. So we have to use await rows dot count. So this method will return count of total number of rows. So it will return total number of rows. Now similarly we have to find out columns as well. So I will just define one more constant. Let's say constant calls equal to await. Again we have to use my table dot locator. Now I want to find out total number of columns which are present. Now for columns, what we can do, we can use this t-head tag as well, because inside this table tag there is t-head tag. So now if you see, this t-head tag is highlighting the entire row, and inside this t-head tag there is one tr tag, and inside this tr there is th tag. So now if you see, inside this table t-head, tr and th, total number of th tags, basically total number of th tags are 4. So this, to locate the number of columns, we have to use like this. So what I will do, we have already located table. So inside this table, t head tag which contains tr and then table header th tag. So this will give you total number of columns. So it will not give you the total number of columns. It will just locate all the columns. It will locate all the columns. And now what I will do, it will locate basically all the column headers. Now what I will do, I want to find out number of columns count. So I am just defining one more variable, one more constant, that is constant calls count equal to await calls dot count. So this method will return number of columns present in this web table. If I want to print this, I can simply print also. Let's say console.log. I'm just printing, let's say number of rows are, comma, rows count, and then I can also write number of columns are, comma, calls count. So this will give me total number of rows and total number of columns present inside the web table. Total number of rows which contains the data which we want to print, and columns count will also give you the columns count. Now let's execute this file and let's see whether we are able to see number of rows and number of counts correctly or not. So what I will do, I will just execute this file. Let's say npx playwright test, file name that is webtable underscore demo underscore page dot spec dot js. So we are executing in headless mode now. So I'm just stopping this. Let's run execute one more time in headed mode. Headed mode hyphen project equals to chromium. Now let's execute this command. It should launch this web page, and from the web table which contains id product table, which is the one we are using, which has some pagination also, so it will locate that table. Then it will find out total number of rows and total number of columns, and we are printing that value. So now let's see. It will launch the test case. I think there is small mistake, so let me see. Okay, so hyphen project equals to chromium, so this is the mistake. So now let me clear out the console to avoid the confusion, and let us execute the command one more time. Hyphen project equals to chromium, so we don't have to provide any space in those commands, so that's why it was giving error. So now it will execute correctly. So now we are executing the correct command. So let's wait. It will execute the command. It will start the test case. It is launching the test case now. So it is starting the test case, that is demo of web table. It is opening the web page. It will open that website. It will locate that web table which contains the pagination, and it will count number of rows and number of count. If you see this statement here, total number of rows are 5, number of columns are 4. So that we are successfully able to print. Now our next step and actual use case which we want to do. So what is my requirement? First, what I will do, I will just print the data which is present on the first page. I will print ID, name and price of these total 5 records. I will just print ID, name, price of these total 5 records. So for that, what we have to do, what is the approach we have to take? So what we will do is, we have to use 2 for loops. First for loop will iterate through these rows. So there can be n number of rows. We already know how many rows are there which contains the data. So with the help of rows count, what we will do, we will first iterate, or we will first use one for loop which will be used to iterate one by one from the rows. So in the first iteration, what we will do, we will capture the first row. So in first iteration, we will capture this entire row. And after that, we are going to use second for loop, which will go through this specific row values. That is, we can use column count. So column count is 4, but how many column data which we want to capture? First, second and third. So first, second and third. So total 3 column counts which we want to capture. So first we will capture entire row, and then we will fetch the data from each cell present inside that first row. Then we will fetch the test data, not the test data, but data which is present inside each cell. So let me show you how we can perform this activity. So what we need is, we need one for loop. So I'm just going to use one for loop. Inside this for loop, let's say let I equals to 0, because it is starting with 0 index. So first row I will be equals to 0. After that, I less than rows count, and we are going to increment I by 1. So this is our first for loop. This for loop we are using for iteration of rows. We are going to iterate through all the rows. So if you see these rows, in this constant rows, what we are storing? We are storing t body space tr. So if you see, this is the web table. So in this web table, if you see, in table tag there is t body, and inside this t body there is tr tag. Total 5 rows are there, 1 2 3 4 5. So we are capturing all these 5 rows inside these rows which we have defined. Now from these rows we will iterate through. So it will start with 0 index. So on 0 index, first row is present. On first index, second row is present. Then third row, fourth row and fifth row. So for that we are using this for loop. It will start with 0 index and it will iterate up to 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So total row count is 5. Row count is 5. So it will iterate from 0 to 4. That will consider from 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Total 5 rows. And we are incrementing it by 1 every time. Now after that what we have to do? So we are iterating through all the rows. So what I will do? When you reach on the first row, in the first iteration what we will do? We will reach on first iteration, we will be here. It will capture the first row. If you see, in first iteration, that is on 0 row, 0 index row, that is nothing but first row. Index starts with 0. So which row is present on 0 index? First row. So now we are going to capture this first row. And what we are going to do? We have to capture all the TDs, all the TD tag, because actual data is present inside this TD tag. So we need to capture all the TDs from first row. So what we have to do is, we have to capture all the TD from this first row. So what I will do? I will define one more constant in this loop. Let me define one constant. Let's say all TDs. I'm naming it as all TDs equal to rows dot nth, because we have started with iteration. So in first iteration, I'm just passing I here so that it will capture nth of 0. In first iteration, it will capture nth of 0. And then I have to use locator. And inside this locator, I want to pass td tag, because we want to capture the data from this td tag. So I hope you are understanding. So first we are capturing this first row. We have reached here in first row. And from this first row, I want to capture all the TDs. So if you see, first TD, second TD, third TD, which contains the test data. So I want to capture all the TDs. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the TDs which we are capturing. That's why we have used this TD. So this all TDs will contain all the TD of that specific row in first iteration. First iteration, it will be 0. It will capture all the TDs from first row. In second iteration, it will capture all the rows from second row. In third iteration, it will capture all the TDs from third row, and so on. Now it will capture all the TDs. And now after capturing these TDs, we have to use another for loop. Now we are able to iterate through rows. But in second for loop, let me just define one more for loop. Let j equals to 0. J is less than columns count, and we have to increase the count of j every time by 1. So this is basically another for loop which we are using, which would be iterating through which would be iterating from all the TDs, because in first iteration we are capturing the first row and we are capturing all the TDs. Now one by one we have to iterate through all the TDs. We have to iterate through all the TDs by using second for loop and to capture the text content from that TD. So inside that, what we will do, we have to define one more constant which will be capturing TD text. So from the TD we have to capture the text. So for that we have to use constant TD underscore text equal to await all TDs. So this all TDs is from first for loop, that is for rows. So all TDs containing all the TDs from the first row, and from that we have to iterate through one by one. So this second for loop is used for iteration of all the TDs of that specific row. So it will, we have to pass j here. So it will iterate from, in first iteration first row will be captured, all TDs of the first row are present inside this all TDs, and then in second for loop we are iterating through all the columns basically. So if you see, it is less than columns count. So we are iterating from 0, 1, 2 and 3. Total 4 columns are there. But if you see now, in first iteration of TD, that is in second for loop, this is present in 0, this is present in 1, this is present in 2 and this is present in 3. But for last one, for last column value, this we actually don't need. There is no text content as such. So what we have to do is, when we are using this second for loop, we can use j is less than columns count minus 1, because we don't want to iterate up to last column. We just have to iterate from the first 3 columns only. We want to iterate from this first, second and third column value. First, second and third column value. That's why we are using minus 1, so that it will not be considered. So that is second for loop which we are using. And then we are using TD text equal to fetch the text content. Which method we have to use? Text content. So all TDs, from all TDs what we have to do is, we have to use dot nth, all TDs dot nth, then we have to pass j, and text content method will fetch the data from that specific cell or that specific TD. That specific TD tag text will be fetched by this line. So it will be fetched by this line, and then we can simply print that TD text. Console.log, let's simply print that TD text. It will print that TD text. So let's save this file. Let's save this file. So this will print all the table data which is present on first page. So this code will print all the data which is present on first page of that web table. So how it will flow is, let's see, let me show you. So let me just show you parallelly. So what is for first for loop? So for let I equals to 0, I is less than rows count. So rows count is total, 5 is a rows count. Now from 5, 0 is less than rows count. So in first iteration, all TD is equal to rows dot nth of 0. Nth of 0 means first row. First row dot locator TD. So all the TD of the first row. So all these elements are captured in all TDs. So total all the elements, so total all these elements which are present inside this first row are captured in these all TDs. And then we are using second for loop for capturing or for iterating the TD one by one. So here if you see, we are going to, in first for loop we are iterating through rows, but in second for loop it will check all the TD values, all TDs dot nth of j, and j is nothing but less than columns count minus 1, so that it will not go up to last column. It will just capture, in first iteration of second for loop it will first capture ID, then it will capture smartphone, then it will capture, in third iteration it will capture this price as well, and we are not going up to fourth iteration, it will capture only this third iteration. So in first for loop of row it will capture entire row, all the TDs, and in second for loop it will traverse through all the TDs one by one of this first row. It will fetch the text content and it will print that text content. So here we are printing the text content. So this will end this first iteration. In next iteration, again it will go to second row now, because I becomes 1. So I plus plus. So I will become first. So it will go to this second row. After going to this second row, again it will capture all the TDs. After capturing all the TDs in second for loop, it will go one by one and capture the text from every column. So 2 will be captured, laptop will be captured, this price will be captured, and it will print those values. Then again next iteration, again it will go to third row. It will store all the TDs and then it will iterate through TD one by one. It will capture the text, it will print the text. It will go on up to this last row count. So if you see this first loop, we are going up to last row count, that is 5, and which is less than 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So up to 4 it will iterate. So all the 5 rows will be iterated. It will print. So if you execute this script now, ideally it will print all the data which is present inside these 5 rows. So now let's execute this and let's see whether it is able to print all this data which is present in these 5 rows or not. So now let's go to our terminal. Let's go to terminal and let's execute this file. So it will launch the web page. It will find out the locator of the web table. It will count the number of rows and columns. Then it will go through for loops and it will capture the data from all the TD tags of the rows one by one and it will print that on console. So all the ID, name and price of 5 rows should be printed there. So let's see now. So it is starting the page. It is starting the test case now. It is launching the web page. It will go to that table. Since we are not performing any click action, it is not. But if you see now, test case is passed. Let me just maximize this console. And if you see, first ID, smartphone, price, second record data, third row data, fourth row data and fifth row data. So we are able to print, and this script is now printing all the data of first page of that web table. So if you see, this is the data which is present on this first page of this web table. So this is the code which will print all the data of first page of our web table. So let's execute this file one more time just to show you the demo. So let's execute this file one more time. So I am just executing this command. So it will launch the web page. It will capture the web table with pagination and it should print all the data present on first page of that web table. So it should launch the test case now. It is starting the test case. After starting the test case, it will open the browser. After opening the browser, it will capture the table with pagination, and from the first page it will print all the data. So now if you see the console output, we can see all the data from first page of that web table. So from this web table, first page data from smartphone to wireless earbuds is correctly printed on our console. So we are able to print the first page data on console. So this is the code for that. But what is our next requirement is, I want to print all the data. So I want to print, after printing this first page data, I want to click on this second page button. Then I want to again print this data. Then I want to click on this third page button. I want to again print this data. Then click on fourth button and print all the data present on this fourth page of that web table as well. So if you see, what is the action we are repeating? So once we are on first page, we are printing the data. Then we have to click on next page button and again print the data. Again next button, print the data. Next button, print the data. So total we need to count how many buttons are there for next page. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Total 4 buttons are there. So we have to click on this button. So for that, first let's locate those button element. So if you locate this element, if you see they are present inside this UL tag. Inside this UL tag there is one ID called pagination. So, and inside this ID equals to pagination, if I simply use this XPath, it is highlighting all the row. But inside that, if you want to find out specific button, so I highlight the specific button which is present inside li tag. If you see, so if I use / and li, it is able to capture all these 4 buttons. So this is the XPath we can use. This is the XPath which we can use to capture all these 4 buttons. So let me use this XPath. I am going to define one constant pages underscore next equal to await page dot locator, and inside this we have to pass this XPath. So it will capture all the 4 buttons, and we can also find out the count. So I am just defining one more constant for pages underscore next underscore count. I want count of those 4 buttons. So we have to use dot count method. So this will give you total number of count of the buttons which are present to navigate to different web pages of that web table. So to navigate to different pages of that web table, we have first find out count of those buttons, and all those buttons are stored inside this pages underscore next. Right. Now the next step. What is the action we want to do? So as soon as the page loads, so these 2 for loops are able to print the data from visible page of the web table. So when the page loads first time, do we have to click on this first button? No. If the index starts with 0, so this is present on 0 index, this is present on first index, this is present on second, and this is on third. So on 0 index, we don't have to click on this first button. But as soon as the data of this first page is printed, we have to click on this second button. This second button is present on first index. So what I have to do is, we have to click on this button. After clicking on this button, again we have to repeat these 2 for loops which will print the data. After that, we have to again click on next button. Then again repeat those 2 for loops to print the data. Then we have to again click on this last button. And then we have to again repeat those 2 for loops to print the data. So if you see our code, this data, these 2 for loops we have to repeat after clicking on next button. So for that we have to use one for loop. So what I will do, to click the buttons, let's use one for loop. So I'm just using one for loop. Inside this for loop, let's say I'm defining one variable, that is let p equals to 0. P is less than, how many times we have to iterate? Up to total number of pages count. And we have to increase the p by 1 every time. Now, if you see, when the first time, in the first iteration, when the page loads, this is the for loop. Let me define this for loop. Yeah. So this is the for loop. And in this for loop, we have to use these 2 for loops. So very first time when this page loads, I am just printing this here. Yeah. So when the first time the page load, do we have to click on the first button which is present on 0 index? No. We have to click on that button only if it is present on first index onwards. So that's why I am using one if condition. If p is greater than 0, then only we have to click on, let's say, await pages underscore next, and from that we have to use nth index of p dot click. So what it will do, now let's understand the code, right? So when the first for loop starts here, so p equals to 0. Is p greater than 0? No. So it will not click on that first button. So it will not click on this first button because it is not needed when the page loads first time. It will print, it will not enter in this if condition. For p equals to 0, it will not enter in this condition. It will directly print all the data. What it will do, it will print all the data of first page. And after that, it will again go to p equals to 1. So p value will increase. So p will become 1. Is 1 greater than 0? Yes, 1 is greater than 0. So now it will click on the button. So pages underscore next dot nth of first index. So which is present on nth of first index of this pages underscore next. So it will click on this second button. This is present on first index. So it will click on this. And then it will print all this data in next two for loops. If you see the code, after clicking on that second button, it will perform and print all the data of that specific page of that web table. Then again p value will become 2. So is 2 greater than 0? Yes. So it will again click on next button. So it will click on third button. And then again it will print all the this data. Then again it will click on fourth button. It will print all the data and the iteration will end. Because we are ending the iteration once it reaches to, it is become p value becomes less than. So we are repeating this for loop only if that p value is less than pages dot count. So total 4 times it will be iterated and after that it will stop. So it will print up to this last value. So all the data from first to 20, all the data will be printed on our console. So for that we have to use this code. So this is the code which will iterate and print all the pages data of that specific web table. So it will print all the data of all the pages of that specific web table. So now let's execute this and let's add some timeout as well. So what I will do, after clicking on that button, I am just adding some timeout so that we can see, otherwise it will happen very fast. I am just adding timeout of 3 seconds. Let's save this file. Let's go to terminal. Inside this terminal, let's execute this file. Now let's execute this code. It should print the data from all the pages of the web table. It will click on next button of each page as well after printing the data of that page. So it should launch the test case now. It is starting the test case. It is opening the web browser now. It will open that website. It will print the data of first page. Then it will go to next page. It will print the data of second page. Then it will go to third page. It will print all the data from third page. Then it will go to fourth page. It will print all the data from fourth page as well. And after that test case will be passed. So now if you see, the test case got passed. And if you see the console output, from first to 20, all the data is printed. If you see, from first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, up to 20. So all the pages data is printed on our console. So that's for this pagination web table data print. So this is how we can use for loops to handle pagination as well. So let's revise one more time. So we have seen about web table. So we have seen what is web table, what are the different tags which are present inside the web table, what are the different operations we can perform on web table, how to print number of rows, number of columns, how to read data from specific row, how to print all the data from table cells, how to handle pagination, and this is the code which we have used. So I am just sharing my screen. This is the code for the pagination handling and printing all the data of that specific web table. So I hope you like this video. In next session, we will see some more interesting topic of Playwright. Thank you for